Oh my God, did Justin Jefferson's 27-yard game signal the end of his greatness? No, you idiot. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. My hashtag everydayers. You guys make the world go round. So thank you so much for coming and tuning in. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today is Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions as submitted to me by email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com, by the Google form in the show notes that you can fill out anytime. As well as on Twitter or Blue Sky, where I'll put out the call on Mondays. I had so many questions about this one. A lot of them were in the same categories. If I can't get to yours, hopefully I got one adjacent to it, or maybe even saved it for later. But we're going to get cranked through as many of these as we can. The first one comes from Arlig, who asks, what do I tell my Packers fan friend who doesn't know ball and says Jettis got clamped all day? Well, first off, he's just like ontologically wrong for being a Packers fan. Okay, so that's just true, like a true inner evil that your friend is just not going to be able to overcome unless they really, do some soul searching. But beyond that, right, we can be friends with people with flaws. The problem is that person had just looked at the box score. Is literally like that tweet that's like, I'm about to go look at the box score and argue with people who watch the game, right? And honestly, this question is answered in the next couple, so I'm just going to move right to Javier Roder, who asks, Justin Jefferson said in an interview last week that it's either you let everyone else go off or you let Justin go off. By the way, absolutely badass quote. Love it. And he says, well, after 100-plus yard performances from Addison and Hawk and Aaron Jones, by the way, from scrimmage, do you think teams will maybe not put so much coverage on Jefferson now that they know what the other weapons on the offense are capable of? Okay, so just to if anybody out there is maybe listening to this, not a Vikings fan, curious, here's what happened with Justin Jefferson getting 27 yards. The first consideration is that he generated 45 yards worth of DPI. These were plays where he was open, he would have got the ball, and the Bears just grabbed him instead, and it was a flag. You won. Like, you did skill wise, that's the same outcome, right? And like impact on the offense wise, that's the same outcome. It just gets charted in the box score differently. So if you don't want to count those, you're probably being pretty bad faith. Add those to the 27 yards he got, that's 45 yards. I mean, that's a 72-yard performance. Like, I don't think anybody's writing home about that, right? Oh, Justin Jefferson, 72 yards. Hit is under, but that's a pretty normal day for him, maybe slightly below average, but nothing to write home about. So there's that for one, right? Which maybe quells your concern in the first place. But Justin Jefferson gets double teamed more than anyone in the league. That's just a thing. He just gets double teamed more than Jamar Chase, more than Tyreek Hill. Those guys get double teamed a lot. Justin Jefferson gets double teamed more. We can chart this. There are stats on this. This is true. This was true in this one as well. There were a lot of brackets, a lot of double teams, a lot of that similar stuff that leaves guys like TJ Hawkinson one-on-one with, say, Jalen Johnson, who's a good corner, but who is way smaller than TJ Hawkinson. And you can just shove him in a locker and then break off. And one of the big Hawkinson over the middle plays was exactly that, got wide open. And then Jordan Addison can go off, right? And they're all in single coverage. And by the way that the Bears handled Justin Jefferson here, I think was, way too far committed to Justin Jefferson, and so you get 450 yards of offense. So the way that they did it, the Bears were not afraid to man him up with Jalen Johnson, and to his credit, I think Jalen Johnson did a very admirable job in this role. I think he actually clamped him up he did clamp him up on a lot of plays. Not all of them, not enough of them, got his bad DPIs. I don't think you can say Jalen Johnson had a day he's going to start bragging to his friends about, but I think he did admirable. I think he can hold his chin up, right? But what they would do is they would lock off that side. So sometimes they'd just be in pure man coverage across the board, but a lot of times they would be in a middle of field close coverage, like a cover 3 or a quarters or whatever the coverage was. But wherever 18 would lock off into man coverage oftentimes with somebody over the top. So you could essentially play 2-man stuff, but it worked within the system that the Bears run a little bit more fluidly. But you would just lock it. You would just say, Jalen Johnson, you've got 18. Everything else is going to work out more normally. But the Vikings found a lot of exploits to that. And so I don't think that anybody's going to look at that and say, this is how we cover this team. I don't think that this is the plan. And I reiterate, I've said it all year long. The teams that have had the most success against the Vikings, aka the teams that have beaten the Vikings, let Justin Jefferson have his. Like, the Lions let Justin Jefferson have his, and they have for like 4 games in a row now. The Vikings haven't beaten the Lions since 2022 week 3. And in 2022 week 3, they overcommitted to Jefferson. They committed a bunch of penalties. They lost the game. All of the other games, JJ's gone off, at least that he's been healthy for. He's gone off. He's healthy for both the Lions games. I was thinking of Addison. But the Lions have won those games. I think that's a better blueprint, assuming you have the dudes to do what the Lions do on defense. Purple Nurple asks, do you think it was good to put out a game on tape where the opponents sold out to stop Jettison? We gashed them with Jones, Addison, and Hawkinson. Yeah, I think it's really good right now that the Vikings have seen a lot of games with different strategies defensively and produced offensively against all of it. They've seen heavy man, they've seen heavy zone, they've seen heavy Justin Jefferson. I think teams that have not committed so much to defending Jefferson have done better, as counterintuitive as that is. But it's not like those teams shut down the Vikings or anything like that. It's just that they kind of just committed to being in that kind of shootout and it worked for them. But I think have the more diversity the Vikings see on defense on the other side of the coin, the more diversity they beat, the harder it becomes to game plan for them, because you can rattle through a whole bunch of strategies and go, well, that didn't work for them. Well, that didn't work for them. Well, that didn't work for them. And I think the offense is actually just good. So it just works. Josh asks, remember when you said recovering an onside kick was never going to happen? Yeah, and I'll say it again. All right, that happens like 1 out of every 1,000 times. Okay, I will be right 9,999 times, and eat being wrong once 1,000,000%. Absolutely, I'm so fine with that. Blimby asks, is there any rule stopping you from kicking the ball directly into the opposing player to bounce it back to your team off of them during an onside kick? So no, I don't know of any rule that prevents that. You can kick it wherever you can kick it. But good luck. That seems really hard to do. And if you miss and the thing goes flying out of bounds, you ruined your onside kick, or you just like squibbed it, right? And you just made it a normal kickoff functionally. So I don't know if that's the best strategy, but you can certainly try. FS Duar asks, would there be any reason to let the Bears return the kick on their last possession before OT, or did Romo just miss it? So you're talking about, I don't know if you're talking about the one with the big long kickoff return that set up a reasonably easy touchdown, or you're talking about the one to before the field goal, before the final field goal that tied it. Both of those got across the 30, which is where a touchback would have been. So a touchback would have been better on both of those. I would guess that the logic, I mean, it could be two things. It's windy. They kind of named the city after it. So it could have just been that the wind took it. I don't know which way the wind was going or anything like that, but that would be something to look into. The other thing is, if you do want to like kind of place that at like the inside the 5 and make them return it in a situation where seconds are precious, the time it takes for them to do a return, assuming they don't return it to the plus 40 and you don't mess up your return, which was a disastrous kickoff return, by the way. Assuming you don't have a total catastrophe there, it takes, 5 of their 20 seconds off the clock. That totally changes the way that they strategize. In that situation, that last one right before the kick that goes to OT, which I think is the one you're asking about. The seconds that it takes are very, very, very precious. They probably got too many yards for it to really be worth it. But you kind of don't expect them to get the kickoff back to the 40 anyways, but you're also having some meltdowns over there. That's a different problem. Left on Landon asks, noticed in the game that John Parker Romo's split looks tighter than an average kicker's. Is he compensating for anything there, or just a difference in how he kicks? I think he's just short. He's 5'11". Will Reichard is 6'1", so yeah, that's the 2 extra inches. You're going to have a different gait, and you're going to have different steps, and I'm going to guess every kicker has a different specific depth and a specific thing. You usually do like 2 kind of like scissor steps to line up, and if you're short, your scissor steps will be smaller, but they also will measure you out by your step instead of trying to measure out by inches and feet and, trying to regulate something. No, like your gait is your gait, so take 2 steps back, and you're going to run up 2 steps forward, and it's going to be the right amount of distance. So that's kind of how you measure it out, I would imagine. But I think that's just a height thing. I've got a bunch more questions, including some stuff about freaky deaky free agency ideas coming up next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Skylight Frames. It is the holiday season, or it's getting there, and that means it's time to start thinking about your holiday gifts. If you are not the gift-giving type, maybe you're not the most creative gift giver, consider a Skylight Frame. I had a wedding this year, and that could be a very great way to share photos with all of my loved ones. A Skylight Frame is a digital touchscreen frame that can cycle through all of the photos of your favorite family members and even some of your least favorite family members. The touchscreen is a total game changer. It's easy to set up and use, and so it is accessible to people who maybe aren't as tech savvy in your life. And it is a top-rated brand with over 1 million happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews, and is available in over 30 countries. It's even recommended by the Today Show, Forbes, New York Mag, and more. Now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, you can get $20 off of your purchase at Skylight of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/NFL. That's skylightframe.com/LockedOnNFL. Get $20 off of your purchase now at skylightframe.com/NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You can get ready to take on all of that good gobble Thanksgiving action with FanDuel. You can get yourself something to distract yourself on the holiday where you don't want to talk to these people that you're hanging out with. It's Thanksgiving. You want to sit down and watch football. So why don't you go ahead and make a gamble and give yourself something to lock into? And right now, new customers at FanDuel can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app also gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of one of these games on Thanksgiving or Black Friday, you can check out all the latest stats, live play-by-play, everything you possibly need to make a good decision. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So drop that $5 on something with the shortest odds you can find, Vikings to score more than 3 points. It's minus 10,000, but you can get $150 in bonus bets, assuming that it happens. That is at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday mailbag. The next one comes from Derfarbschlurf. I swear to God, that is phonetically how it is spelled. Who asks, hypothetical question. If Sam Darnold had gone out injured on Sunday, would the Vikings have tried to sign Daniel Jones once he clears waivers? This question was asked before Daniel Jones cleared waivers, which he did. Or does it happen on Wednesday or something? I don't know. He's going to clear waivers, but and become a free agent. And this week will be kind of when we hear about what Daniel Jones is up to. But Adam Schefter did link Daniel Jones to the Vikings. I haven't talked about it much. I think it's far too speculative for me to really spend a lot of time. But this is what mailbags are for. And I like a lot of people ask you about this, but I like the way that this is framed. And I think the answer is probably. If Sam Darnold were out for a long period, if he had been out, if he were out for the season, I think bringing in Daniel Jones and being opportunistic about that absolutely is something they would go consider. If you're unfamiliar, by the way, Daniel Jones released from the Vikings or released from the Giants. They ate all the money on the contract and everything like that, and they're totally hitting the reset button on that. But next question comes from Hewart, who asks, isn't Mullins a better QB than Jones? I get wanting to try him, but he's probably better than Rapien. Wouldn't Jones want more money than Mullins gets? Okay, yeah. So there's all of those caveats, right? So the idea that Daniel Jones is linked to the Vikings is kind of weird because the Vikings are pretty happy with their backup situation, very happy with their starter situation, right? The Vikings are thrilled with Sam Darnold. Kevin O'Connell has all the confidence in the world in Sam Darnold. He says it all the time publicly. I believe that he is being sincere. And there's no reason to think that the Vikings are looking to switch starting quarterbacks at this particular moment in time. I think the plan is the plan it was all year, and we get all these weird ideas that flitter in and out of our heads. But really, the Sam Darnold's going to start this year, and then JJ McCarthy is going to start next year, and that's kind of the way it is and the way it's always been. The reason to maybe grab Daniel Jones anyways would be to have a better backup, right? And with a little bit of a kind of carrot on the end of the stick, which is, you'd have to agree that Daniel Jones is better than Nick Mullins. I think Daniel Jones is better than Nick Mullins. Daniel Jones has an interceptions problem. Nick Mullins has a worse one. So I think like in the world where Sam Darnold's like out for an extended period of time and Nick Mullins has to start a lot of games, like Nick Mullins, fantastic for like 2 plays, because you don't get, once you start getting volume, your risk of turnover increases. And with somebody who's turnover prone, like Nick Mullins, that can get really out of hand really fast. But for a couple of plays, you can be a little bit more insulated by the math of small samples, right? Daniel Jones is just less bad at that particular thing. So you'd probably be better off there. So if you want Daniel Jones, better backup than Nick Mullins. If you agree with me on that, if not, this is a non-starter. But if you agree with me on that, then okay, here we are, right? And you let Brett Rapien go, who cares, right? But then the other consideration is the money of all of this. So if you do want to bring in Daniel Jones, yeah, maybe he wants a little more money, or maybe he's just happy to be on a team right now and you give him the vet min for the last 6 games. Whatever you do sign him to, you're only purchasing 6 games of his service. The Vikings have already played 11, and then whatever playoff games, right? So you're not buying into an entire season anyways. So money-wise, it'd be pretty cheap if Vikings have a ton of cap space anyways. So they're sitting pretty well there. But then the deal would be that when he leaves, he would be a compensatory free agent that counts toward the Vikings. So whoever signs him, if he gets $40 million from somebody, that counts as a 3rd-round comp pick for the Vikings. So you'd really be buying a comp pick and telling Daniel Jones to go play scout team safety all year and saying, thanks for your service, right? Hey, you can just hang out in a really nice lounge at TCO Performance Center and like eat Skittles and we don't care. Like just go eat Skittles and get us a comp pick. Like, I kind of dig that. It's like he doesn't need to disrupt the QB room at all. He can just go like eat up a roster spot for 6 games and then we can get a comp pick on the other side of it. That kind of works for me. It's the other team that's interested, by the way, is the Ravens, who also don't need a backup quarterback. So that's like, isn't that a very Ravensy thing to do? That was the Schefter report. So that might be a little bit more gamesmanshipy and not like we're looking to upgrade quarterback, right? But okay, so that's the deal. Michael Rath asks, how many interceptions should Caleb Williams have thrown on Sunday? Yeah, there were a few. I would say 3. The 3 that I logged when I watched the tape were, there was one that was right in and out of Cam Bynum's hands. It was just a terrible, terrible throw that he absolutely shouldn't have made. There was also a high ball to Cole Kmet that Harrison Smith could have brought down. He was just a little bit too tall for him. I thought that I would call that interceptable. I think PFF brought him like 5 turnover-worthy plays. I only found 3, but I don't know how they're defining this, and that's what they say. You can ask them. But the other one was late in the 4th quarter. There was one to Stephon Gilmore where, so when you have a cloud corner, that's a corner playing underneath in the flat, right? Outside to the flat. And that guy's bailing really hard. You can't throw something deep there because it's going to be cut off underneath it by that player. It's exactly the kind of Josh Dobbs threw that exact interception against the Bears last year on Monday Night Football. You might remember it with the throwbacks on. So yeah, I don't think that also was very close to being an interception. Stephon Gilmore dove at it, broke it up, but very well, inches away from intercepting it. Those are the 3 that I got. But if you have any others that you remember, let me know in the YouTube comments or whatever. Sam Olson asks, a lot of people out there saying that KOC is a horrible play caller and should give up play calling duties. I personally think that take is crazy, and overall the play calling has been solid. What is your take on the play calling overall? I would encourage those people to think a little deeper about what they think a good play call is. What are you judging? Like what criteria are you judging that on? And my guess is if you really put the screws to people on this, you would get a lot of, well, he should have run on that 4th and 1. You would get a lot of, too much passing. You get a lot of run pass ratio. You get a lot, and that's, or maybe you would get, I don't like that they call too many screens or not enough screens, right? You get like too much or not enough of this or that. And I think play calling is a lot more complicated than that. And I think Kevin O'Connell is an absolute wizard at it. Like, I think this is an absolutely inarguable strength of the Vikings. They're really good at this. I actually just posted a Twitter clip of one where the Vikings used a three-man concept that they actually ran on that failed 4th and 1, which is just a go-to when they got to have it, that they love in like 3rd and medium, anything up to like 3rd and 12. But they did it on that 4th and 1. And it has like quick elements to it. They're actually running something else on the front side that just got clamped up, but there are other elements to it. So they ran this concept, and it's a concept they've put on tape a lot. So a concept that the Bears have watched a lot of tape on. And in a huge situation in a 3rd and 12, in the 4th quarter, in that drive that ended up being the field goal drive that put them up 27-16, the wheel to Hawkinson was a subversion on that exact concept, a concept that the Bears had well covered before in the game and essentially invited them to go do the same thing and then punished them for doing that. That's good play calling, right? That's out-dueling the guy across from you and out-dueling the players across from you, putting your players in a position to succeed. I think they've done a really good job of putting their players in a position to succeed. We could have critiques, right? Like, I have critiques that I say, hey, I think you do go for the shot play a little bit too much. And we can discuss that as a critique, but you would have to do a lot more before I start agreeing that Kevin O'Connell's a bad play caller. Like, we got to point out a lot more issues than, you put up 450 yards of offense, but you went for the shot plays too much. Like, get real. Come on. I've got a few more questions that I want to get to here on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Hillsdale is a Christian college in Michigan, but they have online classes that you can sign up and get for free on all kinds of concepts like chemistry, like the Great Gatsby or Shakespeare, like literature stuff, some social studies stuff. It is a Christian conservative college in Michigan, and you will get that perspective on some of these things. So if you are interested in that, you can get it, start whenever, tune in wherever. Go at your own pace, reading quizzes, all that good stuff. You can get it at hillsdale.edu. Go to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Moving on here with the Locked On Vikings podcast Twitter Tuesday. The next question comes from Mario, who asks, there have been many pass plays this year where Darnold extends the ball for a handoff, but the running back is on the other side of him, leading to a rollout. What is this intended to do? So this is not necessarily an on-purpose thing. It's not a mistake, but it's a world they can be forced into. So if you're going to do play action as the quarterback, you fake out one way, you turn the other way. You don't have really the ability, because of the way your shoulders and hips have to turn to do that, to turn at a moment's notice and do the play action where the running back is. But the running back, who usually has a protection responsibility, has to prioritize that protection responsibility over the fake. They call it abort the fake if you have to. So if there is somebody, let's say you're supposed to take a fake handoff to the right, but there's going to be an unblocked player to the left that's going to ruin this rollout. Screw the fake. We're ruining the fake. The fake's going to look really funny. I got to block that guy. That's what's happening there, and the quarterback can't turn around and like save the fake because they have to be running a certain way, have their hips turned a certain way. It's not possible for humans to contort like that, so you can't do it. The kid that copied off of you in math class, we're going to get to a point soon where that's a throwback, because I abandoned that motto like last year, I think. So it's been a while. Thank you, Everydayer, who asks, why do you think we're having so many issues with the red zone offense, and what do you think the fix could be? It's so tough with red zone because every play is different, right? Like every series is different. And when it comes to failures in the red zone, like why are they fumbling on the goal line more than they're fumbling somewhere else? randomness. Okay. There's nothing particular about the goal line that makes you more like, if anything, the goal line, you should be fumbling less because you should have the ball on it more. And those fumbles are more impactful. But like the fact that, Aaron Jones fumbled on the goal line in the 49ers game on a catch and run that was 30 yards downfield is a different fumble than the one on the goal line that happened in this game. That was, a play that started on the 2, totally different plays. And it's all just luck that they happen to be at the same yard line. Right. And a lot of that in red zone is there. So it's really hard to analyze this. You essentially have to say that the answer to that is different for every series. It's different for every play. So you got to ask about a specific play and why that happens. And if there is a pattern we can figure out, then you can do that. If I were to say, I like their short yardage woes, I think are similar. I think sometimes they get a little bit too excited to go do like an empty spacing concept. And I don't think those have as high of a success rate as the Vikings when they just do a simple run play. Sometimes they get a little galaxy brained for themselves. If you want to talk about like an overall trend, but I have to leave it that vague. Like that feels unsatisfyingly vague to me. And I don't feel like I can get more specific without cutting away half of the sample immediately and say, well, this happened once and that happened once. And that's not really like an overall trend anymore. Jamise Quits asks, one that I got a million versions of this. Our 2-minute defense seems to be one of our few reoccurring issues on that side of the ball. Is there a reason that our consistency falls off during these drives? So I am currently uploading a Patreon video, or I'm exporting a Patreon video. I'll probably upload it in the morning. It'll be up at some point, might be up by the time you listen to this. That is about exactly this, going over the 2-minute drives at the end of the half. And also going over the 2 drives at the end of the game, the touchdown drive, and then the final play that set up the field goal. And there are a couple of things that I guess I would notice about this. For starters, I don't want to psychoanalyze too hard, but I'm gonna. It feels like there's a sense of panic sometimes. Like sometimes they just mess up. Like these 2-minute drills aren't necessarily like, oh, they gave up too soft of a zone, or, oh, this coverage doesn't work, and they call it over and over again, and they keep getting beat in that coverage. Like, it's not that consistent. It's like, oh, they just busted. Like, oh, that person just, like, brain fell out, and they totally did the wrong thing. Like, so they just mess up too much in these situations, and they seem to disproportionately mess up in these situations, especially when there is a hurry-up element. But that does have, the hurry-up element, I think, is part of this. Because when you're in hurry-up as an offense, you are getting to the line more quickly. You're a lot less inclined to use motion, to use kind of obfuscating things to try to throw the defense off. And if you're not doing all of that stuff, you're getting to the line and you're going turbo set hut. You're not going to do hard counts. You're not going to like mess with all your seconds are precious, right? You're getting to the line. You're saying hut. And the Vikings use that time that the offense usually is happy to give them when they're doing their motions and they're doing all their shifts and all their stuff, for the Vikings to shift and amoeba around and mess with things and, disguise their coverages. So when you take away that time, you kind of take away a lot of the Vikings' ability to disguise. And once, if the NFL made pre-snap disguises illegal, the Vikings defense would no longer be viable, because once you get past the pre-snap part, and some of the quarterbacks that have done well against the Vikings, like Jared Goff, talk about this. Once you get past the pre-snap disguise and all the craziness, and if you can pick up the blitz, 2 very big ifs, and most of the teams that they will play in the NFL can't fulfill those consistently. But once you get to that kind of point, the Vikings are in vanilla defenses. They're in Tampa 2, like you've seen a million times for decades. They're in cover 3, like you've seen a million times for decades. They're fire zone, like you've seen a million times for decades. Their quarters structures are very familiar and very consistent and samey. Once you get there, they've got like 2 or 3 coverages, and they kind of just spam those. And they just have all kinds of wild ways to get to those. And that's sort of the thesis of the defense. So once you're to the line and you're in a hurry, and you can't do all that pre-snap disguise crap because they're getting up to the line and they're snapping. You got to get to where you're supposed to be right now. It forces the defense to play things a lot more straight up. And then suddenly it's just the Jimmies and Joes the Vikings don't have. That is my best shot at explaining it. And I've got a bunch of tape on the Patreon video, so leave that up. But that's kind of my best shot at explaining the 2-minute thing. Walker asks, why do they willingly let the game come down to an onside kick so often? So this is what I said yesterday on yesterday's show. I was like, yeah, they're playing the clock a little bit more. I no longer think that's true. I think they're dropping a little bit deeper because of situation, and I think sometimes they drop too deep, but it's only singular players. So I can tell they're not being coached to drop that deep. I think some guys are getting scared and dropping too deep, and I think that's like a note you would want to work on with them to fix. It's like an execution error, not a flaw in something they're doing on purpose. But I'm just going to take that back from my live eye. I do not think that they were playing the clock. I think they were just kind of melting down. And Aiden Koob asks, do we go back to Ingram? I'm not saying bail on Reisner yet, as I hate flip-flopping all the time, but what's the game plan there? My understanding of the game plan is they'll do a few games, they'll look at it, and then they'll make a decision. I don't know what a few is. They didn't give us a specific timeline. I would guess like a month. I don't know, but that's just, I don't know what it kind of felt like vibesy-wise, and I don't know, however much you trust that. But that's the deal. I don't think Reisner had a very good game against the Bears. I also didn't like his game against the Titans very much. And I still think Ed Ingram's a much better run blocker. I didn't really see Ingram, or I didn't see Reisner do anything in pass pro that Ingram can also do. And I certainly didn't see him go like super pristine in pass pro and not take a bunch of L's. He got walked back a lot. And he kind of took L's in the way that he takes L's. But maybe they prefer those L's, right? Because they walk back, but you stay in front of him versus the L's that Reisner takes that give up or that Ingram takes that where you give up penetration. Maybe they prefer that. And I think they want to see a few games before making that choice. And the last one I'm going to do comes from Arkgon, who asks, do you think we can make it through the first couple rounds of the playoffs? Here's my thing. So they're like 90% to make the playoffs. I mean, we're starting to hit, onside kick numbers to give you a sense of exactly how probable it is and how not assured it is. But they're very likely. They're 9-2. They basically have to lose out from here. So assuming they make the playoffs, here's the deal. You walk into a playoff game, you can win that game. Whoever walks into a playoff game with absolutely no chance to win it, maybe the occasional 7 seed going up against a juggernaut too, but that's not the Vikings, right? Like some 7 seed that limped in, some idiot Steelers team that barely exists. The Mac Jones Patriots, that's the kind of the Vikings are not that kind of team. So they're going to walk into a playoff game. They're going to have any chance to win that playoff game. If they're the 5 seed, they might even be favored in that playoff game. On the road. So if you can go win that playoff game, you're going to walk into the next playoff game. Can't you win that playoff game? Why do we have to do all the, why do we have to parlay all these at once, right? Ultimately, 14 teams will enter the playoffs. 13 of them will fail. And yeah, sure. So play the odds. The Vikings are likely to be one of those teams, but I prefer to take things one step at a time. So they're going to walk into a playoff game and they're going to have every chance in the world to win that playoff game. In terms of what happens the next week in the playoffs, let's get there, then worry about it. But I'm not going to look at this team as some also ran, foregone conclusion that they can't go make a bunch of noise. Go walk into a playoff game and win it. It's who you've proven. And hey, can they win 4 games in a row? Yeah, they've already done it twice. And one of those stretches was against some pretty good contending teams. Teams that are going to win their divisions, teams that are also, the Packers, the Texans, 49ers, teams that are also competing for the playoffs. And then the other one was a bunch on the road, which you're probably going to have to do if you can't take the division from the Lions, right? You went and did a 3-game road stretch and won them all. Not necessarily against as good a teams as you're going to see, but you at least proved that the burdens of going on the road aren't killer to you. So yeah, can they win 4 in a row? They've done it twice. Can they win on the road a lot? Yeah, man, they're 5-1 on the road or something. They're doing great. So yeah, sure, man. Let's see what happens. I'll see y'all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.